Hi, everyone. My name is Lu Yao. Thank you for watching our Global Prospect Summit pre-conference podcast recordings. Today with me, we have Angeli Patel. She is an executive director at Berkeley Center for Law and Business. We are very honored to have her as our keynote speaker, as well as a panel discussion VIP. So yeah, hi, Angeli. Would you like to say hi to the audience?
Yes, hi everyone. It's so great to be here. I absolutely love the mission of today's conference and I can't wait to share a little bit about my background and a little bit about why I'm passionate about this work. So just quickly to say thank you for having me and I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, it is awesome. I think there's no one else has better blend of knowledge and industry experience that suits our two panels so perfectly. So really looking forward to hear your keynote speech. But so yeah, maybe in the beginning, can you tell us a bit about your personal career path and how your interests have shifted over the years and why you are passionate about sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always start my career path with where I'm actually from. So I'm from a small town in Georgia. It's called Dublin, and I grew up, in a very, very rural southern town where, not a lot of people go to college. We don't all go out and do big things necessarily, but that's where my journey started. And all throughout, I've always been really passionate after I went to Georgia Tech for undergrad. I was very passionate about how the things that are happening at a smaller local level are connected at a global level. And so my experience at Georgia Tech was very much about international affairs, international security, global studies, and things like that. That took me to my time at the Obama White House, where I was uh, tasked with doing a number of things, but I was in the Office of Management Budget right after around 2016, 2017 where I got exposed to this idea of government as an organization as a business. And that's where I was working on all kinds of issues such as how to increase gender parity, how to have better gender pay, basically sustainability concepts well before I think sustainability as a term was taking off. And it was very fascinating to basically the largest employer in the country to figure out its sustainability performance and then help the US government really achieve some of its goals. From there, I found myself getting into the law. I went to UC Berkeley for law school, and shortly after that, I practiced for a couple of years in both corporate governance, M&A, and then more recently in sustainability and ESG. And after that, still a lawyer, but I found myself really attracted to kind of studying these things from an academic perspective. And so now I run the Berkeley Center for Law and Business at the UC Berkeley School of Law, where we really focus on how we can leverage the power of business and the power of corporate governance really to address some of the larger challenges that our society is facing in terms of climate change, organizational resilience, inequality and things like that. And so I'm now at UC Berkeley and really enjoying it. So that's a little bit about my path.
That's fascinating. I have to add my personal touch on this too. Maybe that's why we were connecting so well, because my passion in sustainability also came from my background. I came from a small town in China. Last time when I visited, we had extreme hot weather and flooding in my hometown. That really made me think, although I'm not a professional in environmental science, but what else can I do to do some positive to society and for the future generation? And a lot of our conference committee members share the same mission. So maybe that's why the universe has brought
Yeah,
us
that's
together.
fantastic. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And then going back to your experience at UC Berkeley, I know you are very active at the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Council and also advisor at the advisory board of the Open Innovation Squad at UC Berkeley. Can you tell us a bit more about what is UC Berkeley doing to achieve its sustainability goals?
Yeah. UC Berkeley is a very large entity. And one of the things that we're really known for is our approach on innovation. And so as both someone who studies sustainability and kind of some of the challenges that are ahead of us, one of the keys to unlocking possibilities for better climate or better standard of living is actually, are we innovating? And so one of the best things about UC Berkeley is that we are focused heads down on climate technology, on biotechnology, on things that basically help us improve the quality of living for everyone. It's actually the number one university for putting out startups, and the school itself has been an academic leader in sustainability, specifically at UC Berkeley School of Law, where we've been very active in kind of shaping the thought around how companies, really corporations, should be thinking about climate impact, social impact, and things like that. We also have the Center for Law and Environment Energy. It's called CLE, and it's very active in helping governments really regulate environmental and energy related issues. And so the university is deeply embedded in the movement for how do we solve major systemic challenges like climate change and social inequality. So no better place, I guess, to be doing this work.
That's fascinating. And then you mentioned sustainability at corporation level and at institutional level. Given that we are speaking at the Global Prospect Summit, representing the voice of the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, I also want to add the definition of sustainable AI and AI development governance. So, how would you define sustainability of AI governance, and what are the misconceptions you observe when people are talking about sustainable AI?
Yeah, I think like let's start with the misconceptions because I think it frames things a little better. Sustainability as a concept kind of has a climate change, green connotation or whatever you want to call it. And the way we think about sustainability in our work at UC Berkeley School of Law is that it's a little bit more than that. Sustainability is literally the definition of the word sustain, that it can sustain itself, that it can um, continue to operate, it meaning business, it meaning innovation, it whatever you call it, but the thing that you're calling sustainability can continue to exist over time. That's what we think of as sustainability. And the assumption we make there is that it takes a certain amount of responsibility, a certain amount of foresight, and a certain amount of responsible stewardship of resources in order for something to be sustainable. And so when we think of sustainable AI, it's not so much that it's just about how AI can solve climate, but it's a lot more than that. Sustainable AI, kind of, I break that down into three or four pieces. The first is truly the environmental component of AI, meaning its energy consumption, its carbon footprint, its supply chain impact. So thinking about its life cycle and its storage and the way it consumes energy is one component of sustainable AI. Um, the other is truly just the social sustainability of it. Its human rights component, the responsible usage of data component, the privacy component, the access and all. That brings me to kind of the economic and organizational sustainability of AI. So sometimes you'll see AI companies putting these great products out there and then fizzle out and stop existing, and you see dollars wasted. So there's an economic sustainability component. Are you an economically viable product? Is it short term or is it long term? Are you managing risks really well? Are the governance structures of the business sane and intact? So I think of that as kind of, you can call it organizational or governance sustainability. And then there's, of course, the ethical component, meaning is this technology polarizing? Is this technology accessible to everyone? Is it creating a gap, whether that's an income gap or in a technology education gap? And so thinking about the ethical components. So all in all, AI and sustainability of AI is what I would say sustainable AI respects the planetary limits, the people limits, and the long-term prosperity of our society. And it's sustainable AI is one that can fit well within that realm.
Oh, this is great because this is exactly what I wanted to hear in the beginning of the conference, setting the tune for our audience. Because a lot of our audience is by design, we're trying to bring in people not historically working on sustainability or AI, getting them to start to think about sustainable AI in their day-to-day work as they are funding their AI startups. So yeah, introducing these concepts and breaking this concept down to actionable pieces. This is exactly what we wanted to achieve as a conference. So
Yeah.
and then also adding a bit on these global prospects on the definition of AI sustainability. Do you observe any geographical differences or perceptions that varies between region, comparisons between the states and other regions in the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question and it's extremely timely as someone with a legal background, and a lot of our work is around AI regulation right now.
Mm,
Um, what we're seeing is there's a different approach being adopted across the world with different philosophies. And so I can highlight maybe like two or three examples of
mm,
this. The European Union kind of came out with the first regulation on AI called the EU AI Act, and that was last year. And that approach is very rights-based and precautionary, kind of human-centric, and kind of puts the rights of the people as the approach to how AI should be regulated. And this one is very much transparency, human oversight of innovation. There are certain fundamental rights when it comes to AI. It kind of sets that tone. And this matters because you use kind of the first mover in this regulation. And so what usually happens in the regulatory world is whoever puts out the first one kind of sets the tone. Um, but on the other hand, you look at what's happening in the US, and the US's approach has generally always been, whether that's AI or anything else, very innovation first and very sectoral. And so it's market driven, and it's voluntary often rather than some sort of top down, this is what we're going to do, or you have to do these things approach. There's a lot of risk mitigation frameworks that are created, but they're not necessarily enforced in any way. And so the US kind of prioritizes flexibility and innovation, and has a lot of strong corporate influence in the regulation itself and how it's developed. And so, you know, what we've noticed is that the governance of AI happens kind of after the fact rather than kind of built into how your company is started. So you can imagine that's a little bit of
mm,
the differences between these two major players. The other piece that's worth noting is actually China, which
mm,
is a pretty major player in the world of AI right now. And
mm,
its approach is very, very different also. And it's kind of showing us, three kind of poles of what AI regulation really represents. And in this sense, Chinese approach is obviously very state-centric. It's tight, controlled. Um, there are ways in which generative AI can be used, the way certain content can be used. And it's really the priority there is ensuring that there's certain stability around the
mm,
usage of this technology. And, it's a lot less decentralized the way you see it in the US. And
mm,
so you see the Chinese approach is a lot more regulatory, a little bit like the EU, but the EU has its own kind of twist to it. And so
mm,
right now there are these three kind of spectrum approaches, and I think everyone else is kind of falling in between any of these, where you can see
mm,
the US is on the least regulated side.
mm. I'm looking forward to our Beijing speakers to explain how they would describe the Beijing model. From my perspective, I think once it's identified as a national priority, the state actually invests a lot of
Yes.
resources, funding, and helping the startups to build the ecosystem. And it is a state-driven and innovative, but like a much broader approach. It will be fascinating to discuss like yeah the pros and cons of each and what are we
Yeah.
observing, how does this vary or drives behaviors of startups and then innovators. Yeah. Okay. This is really exciting. Let's leave a little bit of the pros and cons debate to the
Yeah,
conference itself.
absolutely.
So if you are interested in, yeah, to our audience, if you are interested to hearing the comparison between the three regions, definitely sign up to our conference and join our discussion in person. Yeah, then we just mentioned about the regulation and yeah, policy side of things. What about the corporation and the market? Do you see some differences in behavior and perception between the three regions in terms of AI sustainability or in terms of how corporations are perceiving sustainability in the past few years?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of sustainability largely, because AI is a smaller component in the larger sustainability realm, I think we've seen a lot of movement in China towards um, more climate regulation, more disclosure, at least of corporations, with stock exchanges requiring certain level of disclosure. So, there is a little bit of a higher emphasis on corporate responsibility there. Um, on the US side, it's pretty obvious if you've been following kind of the news here, but more recently kind of that has taken a major backseat where corporate responsibility on climate or gender or diversity or any of those kind of concepts are, they're a little bit in the shadows right now of kind of this big piece called AI, and everyone's more focused on that piece. And so in the US, like while there are kind of certain governance functions that are created to go ahead and actualize and actionalize sustainability priorities, we're not going to see a lot of regulatory pressures to do any of that.
Mm.
In the EU, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Traditionally, the EU has been very strict about regulating social and environmental responsibility amongst corporations. But, as kind of the geopolitics of the region, a lot of the kind of enforcement of those regulations becomes tricky. It's still a very heavily regulated space. The government is very active in asking corporations to steward environmental and social resources well. But we're starting to see a couple of, it's a little bit more complicated there right now with just how the government plans to enforce those things. So it's an interesting time, I think, to be practicing sustainability or to be in the world of being a corporate that's trying to both make money to innovate while also being responsible in that process.
Mm. Oh, this will be an interesting discussion on the stage as well. We'll have Professor Feng. She teaches ESG classes in China. Her observation, and now she's been in the Bay Area for a few years. Her observation is the customer or consumer awareness of ESG and sustainability is still weaker. And you'll hear from another speaker representing the voice of retail companies in the US. He observes more customer driven and young consumer driven ESG decisions being made at corporate level. So the consumer behavior also varies and it kind of drives different corporation behavior. This is also another
Yeah, and
aspect we can
and
compare.
and it's really interesting because by certain regions, right, in the US, where their economic conditions might be a little dire, consumer preferences change, right? You might be
Mm,
willing to pay a premium for a green product, but if it's too expensive, maybe you wouldn't, right? And so,
mm.
yeah, it's really a fascinating time, and a number of concepts converge in this. So the ESG space is fascinating.
Yeah, let me add another question that's more relevant to current affairs. So under the current Trump administration, are you more optimistic or pessimistic about where we're heading in terms of corporate sustainability and AI sustainability?
That's a really good question.
Mm,
Um, I would just say that it's too early. So much of sustainability priorities are driven in the US by market forces. And the US has never really been a place where government priority shaped everything. Whereas in the
mhm,
EU, if the government didn't prioritize it, it might not be happening. But in the US, we're super market driven, we're customer driven, we're opportunity driven, right? And so in the sectors where um, things like supply chain, things like weather events are really disruptive, whether or not there's a government function present or government pressure present, those industries are going to prioritize sustainability because it matters for their bottom line. With AI, it's the same thing. In order to create widespread adoption of that technology, trust and user safety and user responsibility will matter to some degree. Now, as you know, depending on who you're asking, if you're a consumer, perhaps you might want a little bit more than what a company might in its on its own promise. But I don't know if I'm pessimistic. I'm not really a pessimistic person. I always think that our markets do function in a way where customers and willingness to pay and things like responsibility ultimately do cause companies to have to care about certain things. And then you have an ethos, right? So much of technology in the US is created, is founder led. It's CEO led. There's a certain component of that where corporate values and corporate purpose really does shape how each company approaches things and how in order to attract talent, especially talent that's purpose driven, that cares about the work you're doing, there is something to be said about employee pressure and employee values when it comes to creating certain technologies or prioritizing certain values. So my response is a little bit, I am practical in that given the industry you're in, given the type of customer you want, there will be just certain sustainability principles that you will need to implement, whether or not they're required by law. And so I don't think it really matters where the Trump administration is. I think if there's an active effort against certain principles, that might be a little difficult. But I think when it comes to being a sustainable organization that can create sustainable profits, you're going to want to be sustainable.
Oh, that's really encouraging to hear that from you. Maybe a final question. Do you have any message or questions you want to ask to our London speakers or our Beijing speakers through our Global Prospect Summit as a bridge?
Yes, I absolutely. First of all, I'm very just glad to hear that this is a global community. It's so important, especially in times like this, to lean on each other's expertise and each other's local experience and to share it. I have traveled the world talking to startup founders and innovators, and each time it's important to know that the innovation you create is so specific to your region and it is so valuable to the rest of the world, what you're doing, that you need to share it. You need to put it out there and you need to exchange ideas in a world that is highly polarized, and it's no surprise that it's the case. It's so important that innovators are the leaders. It's so important that you're sharing your ideas and you're bridging the gaps that maybe perhaps our government may not be able to fill. And so, keep innovating and keep sharing. And as someone who values sustainability from just a personal perspective, I've always advised startup founders, ask yourself, whatever product you're creating, is it just marketing or does it create real value? Ask yourself that. And always ask yourself that every step of the way, no matter what. Because your job as an innovator is not just to make money, it's to create true, true social value. And it only happens when you ask this question. Is it just marketing or is it creating real value?
That's so inspiring. Yeah, I'm looking forward to see more connections and future collaborative projects to come out from this conference, and looking forward to see you at the conference itself. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
thank you. So a final message to our audience, our Global Prospect Summit at Silicon Valley will be on April 26th. It will be a Saturday from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So please sign up on our Luma page. Our Beijing conference will be on May 18th, and our London conference will be on June 14th. So please sign up, and looking forward to hear your voice from different regions and different sectors. Thank you so much, and see you at GPS conference.